Hi, I'm Elle McNicoll. I'm the author of A Kind of Spark, which is out on the 4th of June, and I'll be reading an excerpt today for Waterstones Golden Time. This is published by Inclusive Publishers Knights of and is illustrated by Kay Wilson. And it tells the story of Addie, who is an 11-year-old autistic girl who comes from a very small town in Scotland. And when her teacher, the evil Miss Murphy, tells her that their village hundreds of years ago was responsible for burning lots of witches, Addie decides to take it upon herself to campaign to have a memorial statue or plaque made in honour of those witches who were wrongly executed. And as she campaigns for this, she realises that fighting for this kind of change in the small community is a lot harder than she first anticipated. It's a story of family and community and embracing what is different about you, and I'm going to read a small excerpt now where Addie is in her classroom at school and she learns all about the witches, so enjoy. As everyone files into their seats, Miss Murphy arrives with a mug of hot tea. I watch her gulp some of it down and shiver. Hot liquids are terrible on my tongue. Always too scorching, always the wrong texture. I think we're going to have fun today, she tells me as she leans against her desk. We've got a good project to work up to before Halloween. Now, if you remember last week, I told you that we would be studying Old Edinburgh as proud residents of the good city. I don't understand people in this village. We live a good way out of Edinburgh, and yet they all insist on pretending that we don't. Nina, my older sister, does it too. She tells her followers online about how she lives in an Edinburgh townhouse, when in fact we live in a Juniper semi-detached house with only one bathroom between 5 people. Juniper is a pretty village though. Small, with a few houses, a church, a school, a supermarket, one dentist, one doctor, one funeral parlour, and the bank. Why everyone is so desperate to be from Edinburgh is beyond me. Now, can any one of you tell me, she pauses for a moment and looks steadily around the classroom, what might have got you dunked in the Norloch back in the old days of Edinburgh? I know that the Princess Street Gardens used to be a loch, but this is the first I've ever heard of any dunking. It seems I am not alone. Nobody answers Miss Murphy. Jenna? Jenna, who is whispering with Emily, glances up like a startled rabbit. Oh, never mind. Miss Murphy moves to the board and begins to draw. She draws a woman, and as soon as she begins to add a pointed black hat, many of us cry out, witch. Yes, in old Edinburgh and many other parts of Scotland and the world, you could be tried and executed for being a witch. I stare at Miss Murphy and feel all of the air in the room disappear. I look around at my classmates, and they all look very entertained. But I feel like my whole world has been shaken and turned upside down. Witches. Real witches here in Scotland. It seems too exciting, too wonderful to be true. I'm standing before I even realise it. Real witches, miss. I stare at her imploringly, desperate to hear more. Sit down, Adeline. Of course not real witches, stupid, Emily says loudly, leaning across her desk to glare at me. Miss Murphy once told off one of the boys for calling another boy stupid, but she doesn't tell Emily off. Emily is right. Miss Murphy goes back and leans against her desk again as I shakily sit down. They of course could not have been real witches. Such things do not exist. Then why were they tried and executed? I ask. The question, I ask it without even thinking, every nerve on my body alive and impatient to know everything. When I'm interested in a subject, I have to know everything about it immediately. I can't help it. Information never seems to come to me fast enough. Adeline, I won't have you shouting out like this, Miss Murphy snaps. Be quiet. My hands are ringing. She isn't explaining quickly enough for my wired mind. People could be accused of witchcraft for all kinds of reasons. Something as small as being left-handed could be enough to cause suspicion. Is anyone here left-handed? Audrey, the new girl, raises her hand. Then you, my girl, might have been accused of being a witch. Audrey does not look entirely thrilled by this notion. I have 1,000 burning questions and I wriggle in my seat, trying to stay on top of them all. It is said that witches were dunked in the Norloch, their thumbs and their toes tied together, and they were tossed into the water. If they floated, they were guilty. If they drowned, then they were innocent. Guilty witches were removed from the loch and taken to Castle Hill to be burned or hanged. But then they couldn't win. Miss Murphy rolls her eyes at my interruption, but I continue. There's no way to survive that. No, Miss Murphy concedes. It was a tricky way of trying people. I feel angry. The unfairness of it sits in my stomach like a stone. I imagine women being frightened and alone as they are thrown into the freezing cold water, the harsh splash, the possibility of floating and being faced with even more pain. Some were even tortured, and some women tried for witchcraft in Scotland came from this very village. I look around at the others. Their faces are difficult for me to read under a normal day, but now I cannot even understand why they're not as distressed as I am. My hands are tremoring and begging to be used as I clutch my thesaurus as tightly as possible to give them something to grip. The only way for the women in this village to be safe was for them to be as inconspicuous as possible. What does that mean? Emily asks. I want to tell her that it means being ordinary and uncomfortable and unremarkable, but I don't. I'm too overstimulated. My legs just want to run to the library and read as much as possible about all of this, and then dash out of school to run and tell Kitty, my other older sister. Yes, indeed, Miss Murphy is smirking at all of us. Being different meant you would probably end up being tried and found guilty. Addie would have been burned then, Emily says, sniggering. The rest of the class laugh and Miss Murphy joins in. I hardly hear them. I'm visualising the books I want to start reading. Did lots of women in Juniper die, miss? I ask, hovering above my seat, practically levitating. Exact numbers are not known, Miss Murphy answers, her smile gone. But records suggest that there were at least 50. Not only from Juniper, but from the surrounding villages. My brain flashes back to when there was a car crash on the main road leading into Juniper. People left photographs of the victim, and flowers. It's still there now, a year on. I think of the cenotaph with my great-grandfather's name on it, the only thing I have of him. My brain is sending images to me as quickly as possible, and together they form a question. Is there a... My brain works quickly to find the right word. Memorial for the witches of Juniper. Of course not. Miss Murphy shakes her head and fixes me with a stern look. What a waste of time that would be. But if that many women were killed... Enough! You've disrupted this lesson enough. She carries on while my mind wanders to the library. I can feel Audrey, the new girl, watching me, and she is still doing so when the bell finally rings and I fly out of my seat. So if you want to find out if Addie gets her memorial made and all of the other things in this book, like the terrible Miss Murphy and bullies at school, and whether or not Audrey is going to become a friend, then A Kind of Spark is out on the 4th of June. Thank you.